It's an extraordinarily common accepted sort of conventional wisdom, but I would call it an urban myth, that 2 out of 3 businesses go broke in the first 3 years, or some version of that. Always the numbers are catastrophic in terms of what the person's espousing. But in reality, it is indeed a total and absolute crock, coming from a total misread of statistics, which I first came across, dare I say it, probably about 25 years ago at some training where there was a professor at UWA who just simply asked himself, sort of looked around himself and said, well, hang on, I look at all the small businesses in my area and I don't see that 2 out of 3 of them have gone broke in 3 years. And he went looking to see where is this coming from, and was finally able to track it down that it seems to have originated out of the UK when they introduced their VAT, or their version of the GST, that what was happening, that they must have something equivalent to our Australian business number, that when a business was setting up, they'd get I'll call it a VAT number, and then if it went well, and they then decided to be a company or a partnership or a trust, whatever they might have in the UK, they cancelled the VAT number for, say, the sole trader and got a new one for the company. The cancelling of the sole trader one was counted by people as a failure, which is obviously a nonsense. This is a situation where business has, in a sense, upgraded. So, if you came to see me, Louise, with a business idea and we started you out as a sole trader just to test it out, dipped your toe, got you an ABN as a sole trader. A year later, you come back and say, Kings, it's going really good. And I say, righto, well, we need, you want to put on a staff member, paying a fair bit of tax. And I say, we might set you up as a company now, Lou. Then we would cancel your sole trader ABN. That is getting counted, even in Australia, as a business failure by most of these people that are trotting out this 2 out of 3 one. As evidence that, when we get to the next slide, you'll see that when you go and see the ABS's notes, as we've got on the screen, they show you what counts as, they call it more correctly, a business exit. Unfortunately, a lot of people out there have been just extrapolating it to be failure. And you can see there with my scratchy notes next to it, particularly the bottom two, the ones that matter, a business that is sold and the ABN changes is counted as an exit. People are calling that a failure. Obviously, if you're able to sell your business for money to someone else, it's not a failure. Or, of course, it's been changed. You've gone to your accountant, you've changed your structure, and you've now brought someone else into your business, or changed the structure of your business. That also is getting counted as a failure. So this exact same problem is happening in Australia. The government department's running the ABS, and as we'll see with the Treasury, both themselves doing it correctly, telling you how they are counting them, but people just aren't taking the time to read it properly. You can see here the next slide is from a document that the Federal Treasury put up from the Department of Innovation and Industry, and they're straight out saying it there to say, do not count exits as a failure, because it does include situations we've just talked about where people sell the business, change from a partnership to a company or a trust or whatever else, and they are not necessarily failures. So it's there if you choose to look, but lots of people are not looking. Then if we actually go and look at the numbers for Australia, you've got to dig around a little bit and find some of these figures, but here is probably the most current ones I can find, covering a decent time frame, particularly long enough to test this 2 out of 3 nonsense over 3 years. Here we've got the figures for businesses in Australia from June 14 to 18, so crossing a 4-year time frame. And even this is just using business exits, so where we are counting people just shutting down an ABN because they've gone and upgraded to a company or whatever else. Even doing it that way, we can see here that the non-employing section, so people sole traders that aren't employing anyone, the smallest of small businesses, we can see that after 4 years, 59.6%, so nearly 2/3 are actual fact still in business. So it's the exact opposite of the myth. And that's even counting as failures people that have upgraded from sole trader to a partnership to a trust to a company. So even doing it the wrong way, we still get a number that's almost diametrically opposite to what the myth says. Then you can see as you look further down, as the business get a bit bigger in terms of employing people, the figures just get better and better and better. And it's clearly a nonsense that 2 out of 3 are going broke. And again, even in those bigger ones, they are counting people that are upgrading still as a failure, or the myth people are. Also remember in these figures too, in Australia, if you've bought a commercial property, you would get an ABN, and then you sell your ABN, you'd sell your business, your commercial property, you would shut down your ABN. That would be getting counted as a business failure by these urban myth people that have sold a commercial property. So the figures are obviously clearly exaggerated. Let's move on. Next slide, I guess, to take the point even further, and the slide after this will put it into a bit of perspective. This slide here that you're looking at shows for the June quarter 2020, so just been. This is the people that were in business that have gone actually broke, because that's the other part of this story, that when people are saying there's 2 out of 3 businesses go broke, that of course people are thinking, right, that means these people literally went broke, they lost their house, they lost their car, it was an absolutely devastating event, they've been completely wiped out. Here we can see that in the June quarter, it's probably a little bit small for people, but if you add up the totals across the bottom, you would get about 1,000 people who have been in business, not in a company, the companies is a separate category, but approximately we are saying about 1,000 people in the June quarter involved in business went actually broke, actually got declared bankrupt or went into a debt agreement with the debtors, whatever the case may be. So there's about 1,000 people a quarter, so let's say 4,000 a year, and then the company figures come in between 10 to 11,000 companies will go broke, put into administration a year. So you can say in round terms, about 15,000 people either as sole traders, partnerships or in companies truly go broke in a year. So where does that leave us in terms of these business exits? Let's go and have a look. This is the figures for June 19, and you can see my scratchy bit of writing down there. If you go down a little bit lower, you'll see the number of business exits, and it says 293,260. So let's be easy on ourselves with the maths. We'll round that to 300,000. So about 300,000 business exits happen a year, but we've just seen in reality only about 15,000 people actually that are in business go broke a year. So of the exits, only about 5% of them are people that have actually gone broke and probably lost their homes and cars and had a terrible event in their lives. So obviously people do go broke out of business. We're not trying to say there are no risks. There most certainly is. You can go broke, you can lose your home, but it is nowhere near the figure that this myth trots out there all the time. And then I think we have one more. No, that is all for the stats. So that hopefully lays out the case that the 2 out of 3 businesses go broke in a year is an absolute crock. What I think is the great, terrible, terrible shame of it, of course, is that it has become so pervasive and so accepted that I just hate to think how many people out there over the last 20, 30 years have come up with a business idea or seen a business they might like to buy and thought, I might go into business, but then thought, oh, hang on, 2 out of 3 businesses go broke in the first 3 years. I don't want to lose my home. I better not do that. Or even if, they were able to get themselves past that, but then they've talked to their spouse. Most people are probably in that situation when they're going into business. They've heard the 2 out of 3 businesses go broke in the first 3 years. And so they said, well, look, it's a good idea, Bob, but I just don't want to put our family home at risk and so forth, which is a reasonable position to take if the 2 out of 3 thing was real, but it is not. So there must be, in Australia alone, let alone the rest of the world, thousands upon thousands of people that may well have gone into business and been quite successful, perhaps even really, really successful, and they've been tricked out of doing it because of this stupid urban myth about 2 out of 3 businesses go broke in 3 years. And it is probably the one stat/urban myth that I hate the most and actually gets me fairly stroppy. And that's it. I hope I've made the case.